Welcome to Making Your Miles Count Production, an educational program to all Canadian lease owner-operators with your host, Robert Scheper.
All right, Dave Ramsey in Canada. That's what we'll be discussing today, and it's a fascinating topic. Again, we have Peter Funk and Dan Scheper as our my co-host here, and we'll talk about a fascinating subject that Canada, or at least Canadians, may or should very much find interesting at the very least. We have a weird country sometimes. But I'll put a little bit into context. In 2007, I wrote my first book, Make Your Miles Count, Taxes, Taxes, Taxes. And in 2015, my second book came out, Make Your Miles Count, Choosing a Trucking Company. And in 2019 and 20, I decided, well, okay, I got to work on my third book. And I wanted to do a little bit more having to do with personal finances and financial management, and it's much more driver oriented as opposed to things in the industry. Started doing a little bit of research, and probably the biggest thing about doing research about finances, you go online and you find hundreds, I know thousands of people, everybody saying this is how you get rich, this is how you get rich. Everybody has got their 10 points on how to hack the system and get more wealth and more money and stuff like this. One of the things that I learned in the master's program is that in order to do a master's thesis, you got to go to the original, which means that you can't write about something that somebody else has written about something. You have to go straight to the original source. I mean, I did that for my master's thesis when I compared different trucking companies, and I actually go to the trucking company contracts and look directly at them, not what somebody else says about trucking companies, right? And so when I was looking into the finances aspect of it, we said, okay, well let's find out who the classics are. As I was going through it all, there was basically one individual, Dave Ramsey, and I started comparing him to everybody else. He has his 7 baby steps, and other people have their 5-step program, their 10-step program, their this and their that, and all sorts of different things. It seemed very much like everybody was trying to copy Dave Ramsey. Like Dave Ramsey has the debt snowball, and then you have other people with the debt avalanche, which is obviously a spin-off of the snowball and stuff like this. I came to the conclusion through my research that the person who has influenced personal finances the most in North America is Dave Ramsey. And a little bit of the story of Dave Ramsey. In 1988, he went bankrupt while he was in the real estate industry. And then he started actually learning how to manage his finances. And then he got into the radio. More and more people started listening to him because he's actually quite interesting. He's a very opinionated guy. He's a good speaker. He has over 600 radio stations airing his programs. They have between 18 and 24 million downloads on YouTube per week.
Per week?
Per week.
Wow.
That is the top 5 downloads on YouTube. He's not just ahead of everybody. He just, like, you take the next, 5, 10 people in volume, and they all together, they don't match up with Dave Ramsey. So he is way ahead of the pack. His organization, Ramsey Solution, has 1,300 employees. He's a New York Times best-selling author multiple times. His flagship book, Total Money Makeover, well over 10 million sold. His flagship program, not just book, but his flagship program is called Financial Peace University. It outlines the 7 baby steps of how to get out of debt. When I did the research on it, first thing I figured is I should not just do the Financial Peace University, but also listen to his podcasts. He doesn't tell his whole story completely all the time. He went through bankruptcy in 1988. The process that he went through in bankruptcy was well over 2 years before he actually declared bankruptcy. He fought his way. He didn't want to declare bankruptcy. He fought every tooth and nail, and he had a bad attitude all the way through. And he even admits that he had a bad attitude. Now, He says, no, as you're going through these things, you have to have a good attitude. When somebody is going through a financial crisis, to expect that they have a great attitude all the way through, it's just very, very unrealistic. I mean, when people go through dark times, to expect that they are going to have a perfect reaction to it, that's very unrealistic. He also does not just personal finances through the Financial Peace University. He also has a whole section on entree leadership, which is the next step. Once you're out of debt, or if you have a business, this is how you manage your business. Entree leadership is a combination of entrepreneurial and leadership. Entree leadership has annual and semi-annual meetings, and they bring in good authors on topics and stuff, and it's top level stuff. He's valued apparently $200 million. So he went 30 years ago from bankrupt to $200 million. Guy's obviously knows what he's doing. Ramsey in Canada is unusual. Just the topic of having Ramsey solutions in Canada. The problem is legally you cannot get Financial Peace University in Canada. The story behind it is actually it's really funny. Not funny, but this is Canada, and Canada is much different than the United States. The federal and provincial government owns words like doctor. You can't just go out and say, I'm doctor, and present yourself as a doctor. You can actually go to jail if you present yourself as a doctor and you're actually not. Bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhDs, even the word accountant. This is very difficult for provincial governments to administer, but if someone says they're an accountant and yet they don't have a CPA degree, theoretically, the way things are worded, they can either be forced not to use the word accountant or be shut down, or some sort of, the government controls certain words, as well as college and university. You can't just start your own college or university without approval of either provincial or federal government. So when Dave Ramsey has Financial Peace University, if you understand everything that he's teaching, it's not a university. First of all, it's not a university. There is no tests. There is no degree, not even a diploma, nothing. At most, at the end, you get a debt-free scream, and that's all you do. So there is no university. There's nothing to do with a university, but he uses university in his promotions to basically say this is the best in the industry, and that's how he markets it in the United States. And he can do it in the States because they have much more loose government control, I guess you would call it. But in Canada, provinces and the federal government would look at his material, and even though he doesn't provide a diploma or anything like that, he used the word, therefore we shut it down. And actually, I've visited his location twice. Once in 2019, that was before moving into the new event center, or the new location. And the other one after they moved into the new location. It was, I think, 2021 or something like that. I went there, and very nice, huge building, beautiful, beautiful place. The old location was very nice. I like to support people that I agree with. So I'll buy all the books that are needed, and if I see something that's interesting, I'll just buy whatever. They would not sell me anything that had the word university on it because I was a Canadian. So any Canadian going to Nashville, where his office is, you can't just go there and buy Financial Peace University. If they know that you're from Canada and you're going back there, they won't sell it to you. At least they didn't sell it to me. I could buy a whole bunch of things that didn't have the word university on it. So because they are trying to respect Canada in that regards, to someday get some sort of an exception so that they can get their material in. They don't want to have a history, I guess, of, being a rebel and, trying to crowbar their way in or something. I can respect that. But really, it shuts out the Canadian market quite a bit. Having said that, if you listen to the program over an extended period of time, approximately somewhere between 5 and 10% of everybody who calls in is from Canada. A lot of people in Alberta and Ontario all have gone onto the program and talk about their stuff and what's going on, and he'll give advice and stuff like that. But technically, what isn't said is that he cannot give any Financial Peace University to them, because that would be illegal. If you listen to everything that they say, and they will not, like if you really need to go through Financial Peace University in the United States, they'll just give it to you on air as a 1 year trial offer or 1 year free, but they will not do that to a Canadian who calls in, because it actually technically is illegal.
You can't even do it online?
There are things that you can do, but they will never tell you. They can't tell you, but there are a lot of people doing it. Like you took it in, did you take it years ago from a church or something?
You have the material, yeah.
Yeah, you have the material.
Yeah,
did you bring it in, or did
no?
Somebody brought it through?
Yeah.
Yeah. But so what actually happens is somebody would have to go either go there and present themselves as a United States citizen, or just not tell them that they're Canadian, buy the material and just leave, and basically smuggle it into Canada and then utilize it, or have somebody online order it, send it to something really close to the border, and then somebody would cross the border, load up the stuff, and then come in.
I think they actually brought it right.
Did it go
into Canada?
Into Canada.
Yep.
And did they claim it at the border? They could have, because it's very inconsistent, of course, at the border, right? You just say, oh yeah, I just got some stuff here for our church, some books and stuff like this. If they don't look very closely, or they showed anything, like, oh, okay, sure. And you can get stuff in, but from a technical perspective, there would be some memo is at the customs, you can't allow the Financial Peace University stuff.
This was when it first came out. Is when they brought it in, and they had a lot of it in the library.
Oh yeah.
That you could purchase the whole thing.
Yeah, they probably can't get it now.
Well, maybe not. But when it first came out, I'm sure that they wouldn't have done it illegally.
No, it could have been right at the beginning when they're first coming into Canada, and then all of a sudden the government said, "Hey, wait a minute, they're using the word university," and then there was a big deal, and
that
bang, bang, bang.
That could be.
And butted heads until finally they said, "Wait a minute, this is going to be our approach to it," and so. But right now, if somebody wants to take it, I'm not going to say how you can do it. How you can do it in Canada. There are groups in Canada. You can look possibly on Facebook and other areas that imply they're following the Dave Ramsey program in Canada. I don't know of anybody who is openly saying, yes, we have it, and come on. It is. It really has to. If it's gonna be done in Canada, it has to be done underground. It has to be done illegally.
But even if you just buy his books, you're getting all the information that you have in the actual Financial Peace University package.
Yeah. Very much. But we're Canadian, and we're not 100% socialist country, but we're pretty close. In my opinion, if I'm looking at it, there are certain areas in Canada that is becoming more socialistic, but then other areas that are becoming less socialistic. In the trucking industry, for instance, it's less socialistic than it was in the past. Prior to the 1980s, the entire trucking industry was completely regulated by the government. In the 80s and 90s, the entire trucking industry went through the process of deregulating. And now basically anybody can go out and get their own running rights, whereas that was totally illegal, in the 70s and before. and lots of debate. Well, I guess a lot of the debate has stopped because there's not very many people who remember regulation. But we are a very free market society in the trucking industry. And so deregulation has been great for consumers. It's a great thing. There's a lot of reports out there. The Canadians save anywhere from $1 to $1.5 billion a year because we're deregulated, and the competition brings the price down, kind of thing. So it's a good thing. There's other areas too, like Stephen Harper removed the Canadian Wheat Board. It used to be that farmers couldn't sell their wheat on the open market. Everything went through the wheat board, and so the dismantling of that is leaving socialism. And there's lots of things, not lots of things, but there's some very key things that Canada has been moving away from socialism, and some things they're moving towards socialism, but it doesn't have a whole lot of strength in there. So if somebody would ask me, on average, is Canada becoming more socialistic or less? If you take all of our economy, I would probably say from an economic perspective, we're becoming less socialistic and more free market. Maybe from a social perspective, probably more socialistic and less free thinking. We don't have the freedom to think and express ourselves the way we did 20 years ago or 50 years ago, for sure. So we are changing. I think the much more long-term approach is that Canada would probably be, on average, moving more towards a freer society. I know a lot of people would disagree with me, but realistically, things are opening up. The fascinating thing about Canada's socialism, and I got a book here. It's called Towers of Gold, Feet of Clay. It was published in 1982. Right in around 1982, that's when all of the banks raised their service charges at a very sort of in lockstep. Okay, in Canada we have 7 chartered banks, and at the time of the writing of the book, it says, by law, the 7 chartered banks must control 70 or 80. No, I think it's 80% of the Canadian economy. So when it comes to Caisse Populaire and credit unions and other financing companies, they can only take up 20% of the market. Everything else must be controlled by the 7 banks. You can't just go out, even if you had $100 billion, you can't start up a chartered bank in Canada, because there's unbelievable regulation in there. And just to put it into context, Canada has 7 chartered banks. The next country that has such a low amount of banks is France, according to the book, with 135. And even the administration of those 135 banks, they're much more independently managed at different jurisdictions and locations and stuff like this. And you go in the States, I mean, there's tens of thousands of banks. I mean, you can open up a bank, you have a few $1 million, you can open up a bank. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. But in Canada, you just can't do that. Some of the laws that we have with regards to banking has loosened up a little bit, like that law about 80% or so. There is some things have been pulled back on it, because credit unions in the last probably 30 years, if you haven't noticed, they get much stronger, like they're multiplying much more. But even still, they can control the credit unions by saying, okay, if a credit union in some way offers a bond on the stock market so that they can borrow more money, they have to they're restricted in some way through some sort of legislation, higher percentage rate or something like that, just to keep the credit unions at bay. And that's just managed by the oligopoly of 7 banks. They say, no, we don't want any competition. We only want to do everything ourselves. So very control-oriented Canada is. It's pretty fascinating. Now, when you listen to Dave Ramsey, there's a lot of things. Financial Peace University, United States versus Canada, there's a few things that that we should just express a little bit about. For instance, when it comes to retirement accounts, in the United States they have 401ks. In Canada we have RSPs. In the United States they have IRAs and what's the other thing? IRA, certain kind of IRA.
Roth IRA.
Roth IRA. That's cheapers. And we have TFSAs, tax-free savings account, and like so. They're basically almost identical, except they use just different words here in Canada for it. And he goes a lot into insurance, which is quite different in Canada than it is in the United States. In the United States, there's a big concern about health care. And they have all sorts of different types of health care, this and that. It's irrelevant here in Canada because we got universal health care. From a financial perspective, we don't have to pay for it. Now, we may have to wait for it, but we don't have to pay it.
5 years.
Anyway, when it comes to disability and injuries and stuff like that, we have called different things in different provinces, but workers' compensation, WMIS in Ontario. But basically, trucking companies would have to make sure that their employees are covered in the case of an accident. Workers' compensation is extremely important. It's actually legislated. You can't have employees without having them covered for compensation for errors. Incidentally, I'm going to go over one thing when it comes to insurance in Canada, and I mentioned it in my second book, and that has to do with specifically Manitoba. Manitoba has one ruling that no other province has, and I'm actually a huge believer in what Manitoba has done, and that is they have a very simple rule in Manitoba: he who has the running rights pays workers' compensation. So how that works is, if you're an owner-operator, you do not need to get workers' compensation in Manitoba. Whether that means the head office of the trucking company is in Manitoba or whether you live in Manitoba, the rule is the same. If you start working for a company out of Ontario, they may ask you to get your workers' compensation. What do they call it in Ontario? WMIS? They call it different in each province. It's because it's provincially managed. And they said, no, you have to go out and get your compensation number. And so then you come back to Manitoba and you phone up your, because they say you have to get it in your province, and you call up workers' compensation in Manitoba, and they say you're an independent operator or owner-operator. Yep. We will not give you a workers' compensation number. You cannot open up your own workers' compensation number if you're not the one who has the running rights. They refuse to. Well, then you go back to your trucking company and say, look, I can't open it up. A lot of trucking companies don't understand this rule, and there's reciprocity, which basically means other provinces have to abide by Manitoba's rules, which is he who has the running rights pays the workers' compensation. There's one in the legislation in Manitoba. It says the one who has the running rights pays for the first truck. If you have multiple trucks, you have to pay for the second one, second, third, and fourth, and whatever. But the first one must be paid by the trucking company. If you're just one operator doing it yourself, if you live in Manitoba, it doesn't matter what other company, the company has to do it. There's a lot of situations where the trucking company has no idea about this rule because there's new people opening up trucking companies all the time. Realistically, they say, well, okay, if you're not going to do it, we're not going to hire you, for instance. Well, okay, then you just go to another company, I guess. Or they'll say, okay, but we're going to charge you for workers' compensation off your check. The problem with that is they can deduct it off your check, and when you leave, all you do is fill out a form or phone up workers' compensation. They do an audit on there, and all that money comes back to the operator. From a legal perspective, it's like a little savings account. So I warn the trucking companies, they better know this. It is a liability that they're carrying, and it is the rule. And I think the rule should be universal all across there because there's so many operators or whatever. It makes sense because the carrier actually, to some degree, is responsible for some of the environment, for safety and the like. They could argue otherwise, but it's a little bit of a controversial issue, but those are the rules. Some of the very, very large carriers that have, depots in every province, they understand it, and so they have a universal policy all across Canada. So, no, in our contract, we pay for the workers' compensation. And they do that because of Manitoba, not necessarily because they want to or so. It's just they know the law and they don't want to get involved with it, so they'll just make it a policy all across Canada, no matter where you are. That's just included in the contract. So anyway, that's when it comes to workers' compensation, disability, that kind of thing. Now, the primary feature about life insurance that Ramsey says, he separates your life insurance from your investments. That's a big, big deal for Dave Ramsey. So when you look at life insurance, you only look at term insurance, not any other policy. And there's a whole bunch of other policies that go under different names. There's whole life, cash value, anything where there's an investment vehicle built within the life insurance, to help pay for future stuff. He says forget all of that because there are terrible returns, and I agree with him on this. There are terrible returns for all these whole life policies. No matter, and whole life is just one type of it, but there's all sorts. You only buy term life policies. That is the only, because that is the cheapest way to do it. You want to invest, you invest separately. Mutual funds, RSPs, whatever it is, that is a separate issue, and you should put your money separately. You keep it twice. And the primary reason that you're going to get all sorts of flack from this is because an insurance salesman who sells whole life versus term life will make 5, 7, 10 times the commission on a whole life policy than they do on a term life policy. So there's huge incentive for an insurance agent to sell, these other more sophisticated products. Maybe we can do this, and hey, think about for the future and do that, and whatever their logic and reason is to do it, they make huge commissions on it. Much more than just a straight term. I'm a big believer in that. Bottom line with Dave Ramsey is he says, if you have a whole life, cancel it. Well, before you cancel it, get term, then cancel it, take out the cash value of it, because there's so many downfalls in that policy, so low returns, that kind of thing. It's just a never plan. That's the difference between Canada and U.S. What I like to do is go through some of the principles and rules, maybe even this baby steps, and discuss some of them, because in and of themselves, some of the steps, baby steps, are controversial. And it's controversial because it's personal. I know we've discussed this before. When it comes to personal finance, we all manage our finances slightly different, and rightfully so. But there are issues that we all have to deal with at one level or another. The primary foundation for Dave Ramsey is that he espouses debt-free living. No credit under any no credit cards, no line of credits, no. Ultimately, our goal is not to have a mortgage and live debt-free. It is, from a social perspective, that is very controversial. Some people can't even wrap their mind around it, and they just say, "Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?" If a person has that response, "Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?" I guess the underlying theme of that statement is, "But it's not possible for me."
Yeah.
And that's where, if you listen to Dave Ramsey and you realize that, okay, the biggest thing that's hindering a debt-free life is our own personal motivation and what we want to accomplish in our life. What kind of life, what kind of future do we want? And that is very countercultural. How will we ever be able to get a mortgage if we can't? We have to get a whole bunch of credit cards to build up our credit rating, and then high enough credit rating so that we can leverage ourselves into a house, and then pay 30 years on a house. I mean, that's the mindset of society. That's what the banking institutions, financial planners and everything, that's what they espouse. Get into debt so that you can get more debt, so that you can get a house, and that's the lifestyle. Everybody, you're stuck in there. There is no other option. Dave Ramsey says, no, debt-free living. There's another way to get to a debt-free living and be not just debt-free from a house, but be millionaires. So he espouses baby step millionaires, where the majority of people can not only own their own house, but also be millionaires. And in my opinion, as a truck driver, independent operator or not, the margins are there so that people can become millionaires if they're in the industry long enough, and if they're focused enough and dedicated enough. But just the concept of no credit card, he's anti-air miles. Some of the logic that he uses is it's a little bit of a stretch. Like for instance, he says one of the logic is about not having a credit card is that I think 89% of people don't pay off their credit card every month. They have carrying a balance. He says that just means that 9 out of 10 people they're going to be carrying a balance. And that's terrible to do, so never have a credit card, which there is a certain amount of truth to that. But that doesn't mean that 1 out of 10 who pay it off 100% can't use a credit card. The problem is everybody thinks that they're the 1%, you know. I know you don't have credit cards. Well, you have credit cards, but you don't use them. I have credit cards, and I use them, but they're automatically paid for every month. So I would be in the 10% just from an automatic perspective. Some of the other logic that he uses about credit cards is, and I agree with this, is if you use a credit card, you will spend 45% more than if you use cash. That is true.
Mm-hmm. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
When you use plastic, you don't feel the pain.
Yeah.
But when you take out your wallet and you actually take out cash and you lay it down, it's now leaving you.
Yeah.
And
you feel it.
Yeah. But the nice thing about that is it's not like when you get your Visa bill, now it hurts.
Yeah.
But it hurts even more when you lay the cash down. But the nice thing about it when you use the cash is now it's paid.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the bill coming at the end of the month. And we always, you mentioned it yesterday. You get the Visa bill. What the heck? Why is it so high again? Like, what went on there now? And then you look back. Well, you don't even pay attention to what you just put the plastic down, and then every month we're surprised when we get the bill. And when you use cash, there are times where I can't use cash.
Yeah.
I can't use a debit card. I have to use the credit card.
Yeah.
But I'm very cognizant of what I put on there.
Yeah.
And so I know what's coming when the bill comes. But I still see guys at the fuel stop laying $100 bills down.
That's in the States, not in Canada. Have you?
No, Canada is basically all card locks.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to fill up anywhere where you actually have a till.
Yeah, exactly.
But in
commercially,
the US,
for sure, yeah.
Like I fill up a lot in Grand Forks, and there's actually quite often where you see the guys laying down $100 bills.
It's very, very unique. Now, I have a little bit of a different philosophy when it comes to fuel cards, because everybody, if you drive for a carrier, they give you your fuel cards. Mm-hmm. So it's not technically your debt.
No.
It is somebody else's debt. Now, they'll take it off of your check, so and it's pretty much instant. It's not really debt, but that's more of a philosophical, hair-splitting kind of a definition.
With the fuel cards versus cash, you can still do it, but you save a lot more money using the company fuel cards, because you cannot get the fuel paying cash that you can get the price that
Sometimes,
you get.
depending on the company, but yes.
Very seldom.
Yeah.
Very seldom.
I know in my research, everything has to do with the carrier's negotiation with the fuel company. And sometimes, like, there was one carrier that was in financial trouble, and the CEO, in order to get the volume or whatever, they had to put $500,000 down, and in order to get certain fuel costing or whatever, and they pulled that $500,000 back, and then so they were paying full retail for it, and all of their operators were paying full retail price too, and it was horrible. Their fuel price, it just went up like 8, 10, 12% almost overnight or so. And so you can get into weird situations where your costs just escalate, and that's entirely because of the carrier. That is rare, but it does happen. Like we were saying before, the trust that we have to have as an operator with the carrier is just amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
and you got to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
But I look at every time we fill up, we record it, how much we put in, and also what the price was on the card. You can't compare the two.
Yeah. There's some carriers that are very proactive and give a full list of where's the best place to fuel up in this week and stuff like this and stuff. And it's not very difficult for the carrier to provide that for the driver, but
we actually have an app on our phone, so you can check in that state, or do I want to wait till the next date?
Not every carrier does that. I would say less than 50% do.
If they carry the Nasdaq card, then yes.
Or they can, but they don't always give it out as a resource to the operator.
Well, with the company I was with before,
yeah,
they wouldn't mention it.
Yeah.
But then other drivers had it, and I said, how did you get it?
Yeah.
Well, you got to go in and ask.
Yeah, you have to be a little proactive.
But the company we're with now, they automatically give it to you.
Yeah. That's quite a bit. Okay, so let's take a look at the baby steps and discuss some of the stuff that Mr. Ramsey has developed. There's 7 baby steps, and the first one is if you're in debt and crisis, first thing is to get a $1,000 emergency fund. The theory behind that is there is truly emergencies in life that you have to be able to cover, and you have to have immediate cash. Otherwise, you make dumb mistake after you go from crisis to crisis. And $1,000. Now, if an individual is an independent operator and debt up to their ears, $1,000 probably not nearly enough. I think a lot of what Dave Ramsey has, $1,000, if you are a T4 driver, totally different. If you are as just an employee in the United States or Canada and you get a T4 earnings in your paycheck or whatever, $1,000 is fine. Mm-hmm. But if you're an independent operator, what would you say is an emergency fund for an independent operator?
5.
5?
Yeah. I think that would be where you start.
That's a little more comfortable.
If your account is less than 5, that's when you panic. That's the theory behind it. And you stop everything that you're doing to get that $5,000 back up again. There's a lot of people who use line of credits and credit cards and stuff like that. Not a good idea. Because I've seen far too many people not even panic until they start bouncing checks, And I've seen it, I got $200 left on my line of credit. I have no problem. Everything's fine. I get paid in 3 days, so I'm actually doing pretty good. No, you're not doing good. People, you have this arbitrary panic level, and you can move that at any point in time. Some people say, okay, I don't panic until I'm $200 from my end of my line of credit. Or some people say, okay, I got a line of credit, but I only panic at 0. Well, just keep moving it. Move it to, if you're a T4 driver, move it to $1,000, and then all the rest of the stuff goes towards debt. Or if you're an owner-operator, $5,000, and then blow off debt or so. But that's all mental, is being able to manage that panic mode. Mm-hmm. And you just force yourself to panic, because it has to be a panic mode. Yeah. They call it gazelle intense. He's got some. If you take Financial Peace University, he does a really good job of a cheetah going after a gazelle, and he's doing it for your life. You got one thing, and that is to survive, and everything else goes to the side, and you're just trying to survive. And excellent analogy. I really like that analogy. But $1,000, and the reason it's and its reason it's so low is to keep that intensity. If it's too high, then people say, yeah, I'm getting out of debt, but yeah, I'm on a plan. But if it's $1,000, they panic, and there's no other option to do it. Dang it, I got to work like crazy and just not spend anything anywhere. He very much focuses on intensity to drive. The second baby step, once you got that $1,000 or $5,000 if you're an independent operator, is pay debts smallest to largest. And that's controversial because most people say, well, you take all of your debts, and what's the highest interest rate you're being paid? It's you're thinking numerically. But debt is not a numerical problem. It's an emotional problem.
Mm-hmm.
And he says if we got a very long time to get out of debt, many months or years to get out of debt, we need wins. And the best way to do wins is blow off one debt after the other debt, and they just not go back into there again. It's a long slog.
But the best thing to, as you're doing that, close off where the debt was.
Yeah.
Close that off.
Yeah, don't go back.
So you can't go back there.
Yeah. Well, he says a plastectomy where you cut up all your credit cards.
Right.
He would say cut up all your credit cards and eliminate your line of credit. Like you don't have a line of credit anymore. So you have no choice.
Right.
It's like, okay, you do this, you're going to die, kind of thing. It's all about intensity. It's a good system, but a lot of math nerds, like financial planners and stuff like it's okay to get out of debt, you put your highest interest rates and stuff like this. But oftentimes the highest interest are some of the biggest ones out there, and you don't get that.
You don't get that win.
Ramsey is also very against consolidating debt.
Yeah, it doesn't help anything.
No, because what happens is, and I've seen it in people that I know, they consolidate 6 months down the road. We'll use the credit card again, and then you go back into the same thing.
Yeah.
The easiest is keep the debt the way it is, and then just pay this one off, and then you see it, and then pay this one off. Yeah. It actually encourages you, and we started doing that. We paid everything off. He says, spoil yourself once in a while. So we'd plan out a nice outing, go for dinner somewhere. But by the time the time came that we were going to go, I said, you know what? I can barbecue a steak at home for way cheaper than that. And you don't even want to go because you know it's going to cost you $100 just to go and eat.
Yeah, yeah.
I just listened to a couple of days ago one of the best explanations of the emergency fund. What is an emergency and what is not an emergency? Is replacing the tires in your car an emergency? No. It's not, because you know that they're almost bald or whatever, and it's going to be 2 months, 6 months, or whatever. That's not an emergency. An emergency is when you have a flat tire. Is the furnace blowing up in your house an emergency? No, it's not. Well, blowing up, yes, but I got to replace the furnace in the next year. That's not an emergency. No. Buying a new car because the other one had some issue or something like that. That's not an emergency. When it comes to car repair, he did a great explanation of it. Well, one of his principles is if the repair exceeds the value of the vehicle after the repair is done, then just sell the car and get something else. These are, intense situations that you have to think through, and you go, man, I really want a new car. Look at this great deal. That's probably one of the biggest things when you listen to his programs over an extended period of time where people get stuck the most is, well, I use the emergency fund for that. Well, what is that? Well, then he explains it, and he says, that's not an emergency. No. Christmas is not an emergency because it comes in December every year, there's all sorts of things. And what that does is it forces people to do what they call, or what Ramsey calls, sinking funds. So if your tires, you got 6 months left, and so it's going to be, say, $600 to replace your tires on your vehicle.
Plus $1,000.
I
just got a quote, $1,600 to put tires on my truck. Yeah, on my pickup.
Oh, your pickup.
Yeah,
$1,600.
$1,600.
I just did tires on my Armada, and that was $12.
Jeepers.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking a small car, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're right. Yeah, okay, that's understating. $600 maybe is
Okay,
very,
depends
very-
on your vehicle size.
Depends on if you, we got a little Jetta, and
Yeah.
the Jetta will be very different.
Yeah, it would
That's
be.
for sure.
Yeah.
But realistically, you have to have sinking funds for everything that you can foresee.
Preventative
and you have
maintenance.
to put money aside in a separate account to make sure that you have money ready for it.
I do have a slight twist to the vehicle maintenance. You said each maintenance issue should be less than the cost of the vehicle. Early in our marriage, we had a small little Chevy car, and it was
Oh, the
nickeling.
Chevette?
It was nickel and diming us to death. Like each month there was a little bit. It was getting us around. It would always start, but run, always chasing something. We're trying to justify and afford a new vehicle at the point, or a different vehicle. We didn't even want a new one. We just wanted to upgrade from this thing that's always whatever. We couldn't figure out when the time was to jump because, it was just $40. Oh, it was just $70. And it was just nickel and diming us, right?
Okay, but
And
if you would look at a month, what's the total amount that you're doing in a month? If you say 40, 70 or whatever.
Well, we were probably doing $150.
But the value of your vehicle is higher.
Yeah, but it was $2,000-$3,000. Like, it was not much of a vehicle.
Yeah,
You
I know.
know.
I had a Jetta like that
Yeah.
years ago. I mean, we
Yeah.
had soda straws in there for fuel lines and all
Yep.
sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we kind of lucked out because we were praying about it. Like, what do we do? What do we do? And there was one night there was a windstorm and a tree fell on it. So
Oh, praise the Lord.
yep, done. Now we can figure out
Now
how
you got
to,
an
how to-
insurance claim, and
Yeah.
there you go.
it
Sometimes-
was a blessing because we actually had to figure out because it didn't fall in that exact category, right?
Yeah. Like if you have a lot of things that need maintenance and stuff like that, it definitely is. It can get quite cumbersome, especially how intense.
Yeah.
Your cash flow is.
Well,
Simplifying is a big thing.
Yeah. I did a
Simplifying
lot
your
of the maintenance myself. It's just you come home and instead of spending time with the kids, I got to go buy $30, do this on the car, and you spend the evening working on fixing the car. It became an emotional anchor for my wife and I, and it was
okay, I don't think. Were you actually in a financial crisis though?
No,
It was tight.
It was tight.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this I think what they're saying is, look, you got a goal, and your goal is to get out of debt.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to survive in a vehicle long enough,
Yeah.
in your little hoopty, what he calls it, until you can pay off this debt, and then you pay off
Yeah.
that one, and then you pay off this one, and then take the next problem, and then and
Yeah.
you deal with it only when you have to, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's not an exact science, especially with used vehicles, because you can say, I think I can stretch this for a year, and then all of a sudden, the head gasket goes and poof, and you got nothing. That can happen. So you take, 5 steps forward and then you slide 7 back. In getting out of a crisis financially, that happens all the time. I went through 10 years of financial crisis. And all it is 5 steps forward, 3 back, 5 steps forward, 7 back, 5 steps forward, 1 back. It's just endurance. You just got to stick to it and stay intense and not give up. I've seen so many clients come in and they say, well, I didn't want any more of this or whatever. So you turn around and, bought this to replace that. And then he's in a horrible situation, I had one client, probably the most extreme situation. He didn't like the way this truck drove. So he went out and he bought a new truck. And now he had one brand new truck and a relatively new truck, 2 truck payments. And then he started trying to sell the first one. So he tried to sell the first, and yet it was operating and he convinced himself of something. And realistically, he had an emotional response and he got himself in a worse situation. In order to get out of a financial crisis, the key word in it is just focus. Focus, and stop the distractions. But dang, our lives are so distracted.
Yeah.
We can be distracted 500 times in a day. And you got to get it back on track all the time.
The analogy of the gazelle is great. My wife and I have different strategies. She's the gazelle. She can just, or she's the cheetah. She can go and stay focused and high speed going for it. And for me, like you were just saying, I see the long picture. I realize there's some long-term endurance that needs to happen here. My mental pace isn't the same as hers. I can set my goal and say, you know what, I've got these milestones. I've got to make these milestones and just not slowly knock them off. If I have to do them at my wife's intensity level for that same endurance, I burn out before I get there. Yeah. I've been really blessed. We've worked out a system where I know it's time for her to lead. She's got to be in charge in this direction, and she takes control. And then when we're talking and communicating, she realizes, okay, now is the point where she has to back off and let this endurance that I naturally have, and I can set a pace that we can just knock things off. And we realize working steady, and then every once in a while we got short little bursts.
You have a system that works.
We have, yeah.
In Canada,
that teamwork is amazing.
Yeah, in Canada, 60% of all households, the details are managed by the female, because she's the more detail-oriented guys, and I see it in my practice all the time. We get the husband and wife coming in, year-end meeting, we're doing it, and I'm talking all the numbers or whatever. The wife is standing there and focusing, interacting, and the guy's standing there going, looking at the ceiling tiles and playing with the little toys on my desk. You know, he's not focused at all, you know. Yeah. But I mean, he keeps the truck between the ditches, and he knows what his job is, and he stays within his lane. But making a good team player today, as long as they mutually work together, that it works or whatever. But family dynamics, husband and wife, they both have to be fully on board. When I started Dave Ramsey, I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna do this, so my wife and I were gonna both be on the same field. We're gonna do the Ramsey plan just to. And after 2.5 years, I was very, very successful because I stayed married. We're not on the Ramsey plan, but we're still married, and so we don't have unity in here. That's for. I don't worry at all about my wife because she's not a big spender. I mean, she buys most everything on Kijiji, like these couches or Kijiji, I don't worry that she's overspending. But to go to the level of intensity, we went through that for 10 years where we, a nickel and dime and we only have so much and stuff like this. Now we're basically at a debt-free level or stage or whatever. She doesn't want to go back there. She'll stay within her realm. She gets a certain allot and I get a certain allot per month, and we can see every month what we do. And if we're slightly over 1 month, well, then we say, okay, next month we bring her down, and we're slightly lower the next month. And so we're still very disciplined, well within the range and acceptability and everything. We have our system working, but that's because we went through unbelievable hardship to get in a debt-free situation. And most people have that level of intensity until the pressure is off. After paying down the debts smallest to largest, then the third baby step, which is getting a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And that generally, that would vary quite a bit, but the average truck driver would be about $15,000 to $20,000 at least, somewhere in there. If a person or if a family has $15,000 to $20,000 in a savings account available in cash and not invested or anything, but it's available for emergencies, that's what you're supposed to use for emergencies. So you're no longer restricted to just $1,000. Now you got $15,000, you got $20,000, and so you don't have to worry about something. Your tranny goes off in your Armada or whatever, $4,000, boom. Yeah. You can do it, and you don't have to worry about any of those things. And then you're intense to get that 4,000 back up there again, and you go. That's the issue that you're dealing with. However, if you're used to living on credit and you're used to living paycheck to paycheck, and suddenly you get to the point where yoo-hoo, I'm debt free. You're past the second baby step. Now to actually put money aside into a savings account, you still have to be intense in order to get that, $15,000 to $20,000. Oh, the motivation difference. because there is no natural pressure anymore. That's tough. And that's where a lot of people miss out. They get to debt free, and then the pressure's off, and then they slack off. Even if they don't go back into debt, which a lot do, they go back into debt and whatever. But if they don't do that, they're still going to technically get to a crisis situation because they don't have an emergency fund. You know that when I bought my first truck, I can't stand debt, so everything that came in, pretty much everything went straight to debt. And we were 6 months into it. Everything was fine. All of a sudden, I think it was an alternator that went or something like that, and I had $400 payment. This was 30 years ago, but $400 payment. Oh my goodness, what in the world? $400 for an alternator. Had no idea about a maintenance fund, no idea about anything like that at the time. And I thought, I better get an emergency fund together. And I learned the hard way, and luckily I survived. But there's some people with no safety net at all. No, nothing. They just, credit cards, line of credit. Well, that's just part of the business. You have no way to, and then using that. That's not how to live debt-free. You got to have an emergency fund. And you have to be intense all the way until you have the emergency fund. Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest problems is people not living with an emergency fund. They just use the financial institutions, either credit cards or line of credit or whatever. Well, that'll be my emergency fund because it's a good use of credit or a good use of if you put $20,000 in your account, you should be making good money on that as a return. That's not the purpose of that. It's an emergency fund, and you just have to have access to it. Who cares how little interest you're making on it? Yeah. You can do a money market fund that does okay, but you have direct access to it. You can move it at any point in time for a true emergency. Once you have that, there is what they call 3B, which is save for a house. That's a really cool issue in Canada. How do young people get into a house? We talked about this the other day a little bit, where you got Toronto, Quebec, Vancouver, when you got $500,000, or not $500,000, you got $1.5 million house, just a little, not a house, a condo. How does somebody get into that? Their basic rule is 10 to 20% down, and you don't finance it over 15 years. And the payment on there can't be more than 25% of your take-home pay. Every bank in Canada is going to allow somewhere around 35 to sometimes even 40, depending on how they run. You can get even higher than that, depending on how they manipulate. They'll just make it work. And they don't care how much in debt you are. The goal is not to get into a house at any cost. The goal is to get into a house so that you can pay it off, so that you're debt-free and have your own house. That's hard to fathom in Canada. And when they talk about, it's not possible for young people to own their own houses anymore. Yes, it absolutely is. A lot depends on where you live, and and probably bigger has to do with how much you're willing to sacrifice and work to get to it. You were young when you first owned a house.
I was 20.
You were 20. Oh, that's young.
It was a mobile home, but...
Yeah, okay. It's a real home. What was your first...
25.
25 when you got your first house.
Yeah.
We started with a mobile home too, which, by the way, mobile homes are not considered homes. By Dave Ramsey
says too,
Anything on wheels is...
Well, ours was a home.
Yeah. You made money on it, didn't you?
We did. Oh, yeah. We bought it for $8,000 and sold it 5 years later for $17,000.
17,000. Yeah. You doubled your money basically.
Yeah.
But you had to pay lot fee for that too, also, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah, but it wasn't a huge amount at that time.
No. It was, what was it, about $85 a month or something?
Yeah. Well, that was back in the Stone Age, though.
Yeah.
I remember. Now you're $300, $400, sometimes $500.
Yeah, but now we had $17,000.
Yeah.
And our first house, we bought a house with 5 acres of land. For $54,000, so and then you put 16. We had $20-some thousand down.
Yeah.
So
we were almost halfway there.
We were in very good shape.
Yeah.
And I had just bought my first highway tractor when that happened, and so we did really well.
Yeah, but you had a lot of debt then. You had both a mortgage and also a truck.
Well, I bought a very cheap truck.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't know how many years old it was. 10 years old, actually. Yeah, it was an 85, about a 95. And I paid $20,000 for it. And I paid it off in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm like you. I don't like debt.
Yeah.
And the sooner you can pay it off,
Yeah.
the better.
But yeah, if a young person in Canada wants to own their own home, it is possible. But you can't start at the top.
No.
You can't start, at the same house that your parents lived in. Like you were saying the other day, you have to start small. Like we bought a small house or house trailer. We had a few house trailers before, right at the beginning. I was 33, 35, something like that, before I owned my own house. But by the time we owned our own house, I had 50% down. And it just goes saving.
Yeah.
The house itself was $96,000 at the time. Right now, I guess today it would be probably valued at about $350 or something like that. So we had a lot down.
Yeah.
But I mean, you had to work and sacrifice and pretend you had nothing for a decade first.
Yeah. Well, we did really well on our second house. When we sold the one in the country, then we moved into town, and it was just before the housing market started to go up.
Oh yeah.
And we bought our house for $89,000. I'll never forget that. $89,000. And we lived in it for 13 years, and I sold it for $304,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
But at the same time, you were remodeling it in there too,
yeah, we
right?
did, but we did all the work ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I had was material.
Yeah.
I hired, the only thing I hired out was electrical and the plumbing.
Oh yeah.
But all the rest of the stuff we did ourselves.
So it is possible for young people
Yeah.
to own their own house, but they have to. They can't think immediately. Like
No.
I want to, now that I'm okay. Let's say they get married or whatever. Okay, within 2 years you have to own your own home. Well, why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you have to do it? And they say, well, because renting is throwaway money. Well, yeah, you're right. So is interest on your
Interest.
mortgage,
Yeah.
as well as property tax.
Yeah.
And sometimes maintenance that you have to do on your house.
Yeah.
There's lots of things you have to throw away money at.
But even if you buy, let's say, an older home,
Everybody
and
should
you're a
start
little
with an
bit-
older home.
and you're a little bit like, learn how to do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do some renovations. Do some painting. It doesn't take a whole lot. And
No.
you can make it look a whole lot different.
Yeah.
And that's what Ramsey talks about too. That's how he started.
Yeah.
They would renovate, and then he'd sell it for a profit,
Yeah.
and he could buy a better one,
Yeah.
and you buy a better one, and you can do that debt free.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. They buy a house and they think that that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Buying a house is a part-time job. It's not
Yeah.
just
No, there's a lot of maintenance.
yeah, and just to say, I'm going to go to work and hire that out. It can be done, but you can't get ahead that way.
No.
Yeah.
You have to learn
Just the basics.
You need to know when you need to do this maintenance and schedule this and just to change your own furnace filters. You've got to start learning about your house.
Yep.
And
No different than learning about your truck.
No.
exactly.
Everything we have is all responsibility.
Yeah.
You know?
I do most of my own work. Like even having like your sump pump. Like we live in the country.
Yeah.
Have a spare sump pump.
Yep.
A brand new one sitting there.
Yep.
You just switch it out. And those things will always go on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, I've had, I don't know how many times they've gone out on a Saturday
Yeah.
night. And
Yeah.
now the stores are closed. Now what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
That's a
Or
good
even
point.
on, like, we were talking about this last time about doing maintenance on your truck. I needed to change a thermostat on my truck. And I had never done that before. And so I couldn't get it into a shop, but I need to get it done. So I went on YouTube.
Oh, YouTube is
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
Like, how do you, like, and I specified my engine.
Yeah.
He showed you how to do it. And I
Yeah.
thought, I can do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I went and picked up the thermostat and the gaskets and stuff. And he took you step by step how to go through it.
Mhm.
And so the other day I just took it all apart.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
And you got it done.
Now get a load of this. The shop charged me 2.5 or to 3 hours to do that job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It took me less than 45 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And
Less than 45 minutes. My wife comes in to the shop. Well, she had, like I said, we had finished lunch. I went to the shop. I said, I'm gonna tackle the thermostat. Well, she came in about 45 minutes later, and I had almost everything put back together. She says, I thought you were doing thermostat. I said, it's already done. What?
Yeah.
You know, my wife had the battery went out. We couldn't start the vehicle. And then we found out the lights were on. And then it's okay. We boosted it and got the lights were on. Well, why are the lights on? Because it said that a door was open. Well, there's no door open. And then we find, well, wait a minute. The window in the back, we have a Honda Pilot. Okay. And we went around to the back, and I pulled this little latch, and the window was open on the back hatch door. I thought, oh, cool. And so I slammed it, you know, and then the light was on, everything worked. And then I told my wife, I says, it wasn't used. Somehow or other, the back window was open. She says, I didn't know the window came open. What are you talking about? And I said, yeah, I didn't know it was open either.
Yeah.
She said, well, how do you get it open? I said, I don't know. and so she came home one day, and she was in the parking lot for probably 45 minutes of our home. And she was there. I didn't know why she was in the car, but she Googled how to open up the hatch. And she's on YouTube. The guy says, and he starts laughing. He says, okay, I'll on this age model, I think it's 2011 Honda Pilot, open the hatch lid. And he says, the first thing you do is don't bother going to a Honda dealer. He says, I went there and asked them, and they said, oh, that doesn't open. That's just for show. That's what the dealership said. They didn't even know that it opened, you know. And he says, but this is how you do it. And he says, this, blah, blah. And now she knows how to open up the window or whatever. But sometimes the dealership doesn't even know how to do it.
Yeah.
And Google knows more than what the dealership
Well, people
does.
have experience, and so they posted, right?
Yeah.
To help you out.
That is amazing. Can you imagine, like, before Google or before YouTube or whatever,
Yeah.
like, we all had to flip through a manual, and it takes 20 hours. Then it makes sense to go to a dealership.
Yeah.
But if you can actually have access to more information than the dealership has.
Yeah, and this little job alone saved me $360
Sure.
Yeah.
of labor.
Yeah.
Plus the markup on the stupid thermometer.
Yeah.
That's
And
like
if
basically you made
look at it-
$300 an hour.
Yeah, I was just going to
Not
say,
even, or more than that.
Yeah.
That's a good rate.
And
I'll hire you for half that.
Half that.
But you know what? I'm doing more and more all the time, and I'll rather stay home a day longer and do it myself.
Sure. Great topic. But that's it for 3B of the baby steps. The next one is baby step number 4, which is 15% of your earnings to long-term savings, which is mutual funds, growth in income, aggressive growth in international, which is 401k or RSPs, Roth IRA, TFSA. What do you think about putting aside 15% of your earnings all the time into mutual funds? Give me your opinions on that, because I have my opinions, but
15.
I know how we've done it, or
That-
should I say I've done it.
That is a hard number to reach, 15%.
That means your lifestyle has to go down.
Yes.
You can't have lifestyle creep or anything. It's like a rule that you have to follow and just throw money into mutual funds.
15%, that's a lot of money for me.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
See,
Yeah.
my wife and I, we did not do 15%. And that was because we were gazelle focused on a lot of other stuff. And we were using that 15% to knock off the debt that we were in.
Yeah.
And if you got to stick with all of these numbers, you got to really sharpen your pencil. And it's hard work. It is very hard work.
I guess the key that Ramsey is talking about with the 15% is that he's focusing on helping people become millionaires.
Well, it's retirement too,
It's
right?
retirement.
Yes.
RSPs, that
Yeah.
would be included in there. RSPs, TFSAs, and the like. My wife and I have started with nothing. I actually said once that I married my wife for her money because she had $100. She did. Then she had 100. I had nothing when we first started. Just nothing. We did really well, and then we did horrible, and then we back up again. So we've got this roller coaster happening. And during the downtime of what we experienced, everything went to debt and recovery and stuff like that. And building the firm that I have was not an all. It's probably one of the most. I was gazelle intense for basically about 10 years, starting in 1998 all the way to 2008. And
that's a long time.
that is an outrageous amount of time.
That's a long time.
I was not a nice person during that time. I was not. And during that time, just full disclosure, my wife kicked me out. And in my defense, had I the opportunity to kick me out, I would have too.
Yeah.
Because I was not a nice person to live with.
They said 3 to 5 years. You should have it done.
Getting out of debt.
Yeah, because if you're gazelle intense, to go more than 5 years is very rare.
Yeah. You got to start selling things in order to. You have to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gazelle intense basically because we got completely wiped out, and actually worse than wiped out. We were in a negative for a long time. And then at the same time, I found out about non-taxable benefits, wrote the book, and even at the darkest time, published the book and started building the firm. There was a time when everything was just hand to mouth. That's all we did. Got rid of our debt, and we were just on the straight cash system. We were in the Ramsey thing. Just prior to this, actually, we went down to Texas to visit our parents for a couple of weeks off as in holidays, and that's where I found the CD, Total Money Makeover, and that's where I listened to it and realizing debt free. That's the way to go. It revolutionized my area, and everything is cash, but it is brutally hard. Like for instance, we built a firm all the way through, and I was working part time for you, Fridays and Saturdays driving truck. And while I had this firm going, like this, I had however many employees at that time, 6, 7, 8 or something like that. I remember hiring a receptionist, and yet I'd still go out on the road on Fridays and Saturdays because I couldn't meet payroll otherwise. And so it was intense through the entire time. Intensity for 10 years, managing cash. Now I'm a nerd. I have cash flow. I did cash flow projections for my business. I knew where I was all the time. I did bank reconciliations once or twice a day sometimes, just to know exactly where all of my checks were to make sure that nothing would bounce. And to my understanding, nothing bounced that was my problem. There was once that the bank did it and they corrected everything like that. I never bounced a check, but there was so many times I had $12.61 in the account and I just had to wait till the next check came in, and it was intense. If you do that for an extended period of time, it's high nerves, it affects you. It psychologically it affects you, and 10 years is too long, but I had the focus. Right now I don't worry about things for the simple reason, number one, I get debt free, but number two, I know I can do it. And there are people out there, all they really have to do is they have to be shown that they can do it. They can get out of debt, and they can pull themselves out of it. They just have to endure it. And endurance is the key. Focus, endure, and just...
We kind of touched on a topic, I think it was yesterday, about mentorship, or what's the word now?
Accountability?
Not accountability, but having someone train you. And the story I was going to get to was the first time I bought my first truck. And you were doing your accounting, and I had never been in trucking, and you advised me, you know what, this is a good company, put your truck on here, you can buy the truck, and you can do your thing, and you can make it go. Till then, I had been in construction. I had no idea about what was happening. I knew how to steer, and I knew how to shift, and just barely at that time. As far as dealing with the finances on the truck end, I didn't know. Like, we had a household finances, whatever, but how do you take that out of the truck and this? We had no idea. So you had advised me, you know what? Do it. You can do it. And I remember at the end of every month coming over, so how am I doing? You're doing good. Keep going. That's all I needed to hear. Yeah. I didn't know the numbers. I at that point I couldn't grasp. I knew I had a focus in mind. Mm-hmm. I had someone mentoring me or watching out on this side, and had my best interests in mind. Where am I doing this month? Oh, you're doing okay? Yeah. Keep going. It was amazing. It got me, it was probably a 6 months to a year. And then I was able to relax and start absorbing some of the numbers that you were throwing at me. And I'm going, I made how much?
Yeah.
There's what kind of revenue coming in? It was, it was really good and tense for a while.
It's good. Everybody needs to be mentored. I mean,
Yes.
And to use Dave Ramsey as a mentor is good. The person doesn't have to be there physically,
Right.
physically, in order for you to be mentored by them.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the best mentors I've had are actually dead. Like I read their biographies and stuff like
Yeah.
this, so I go, oh my goodness, that's a great idea. That's a life lesson kind of a thing. Dave Ramsey is like that. He is, in my opinion, the king of personal financial management. There's nobody else that can touch what he does. And if you see anything else that's personal finance, it's a spin-off from what Dave Ramsey does. I was going to do making your finances count, but why am I reinventing the wheel when the wheel is right here in Dave Ramsey? And I can focus on other things in the trucking industry and in other focuses, and nobody does it better than he does. And just focus on that. Like that's one of the reasons why we have this podcast about Dave Ramsey. It's because he's the best, and everybody should be using him that needs to get out of debt. Far too many guys get into the industry as an independent operator. They get into personal financial problems. Well, okay, we just need more money. So how do you get more money? Well, you get become an independent operator, where you're in the hole to start off with, and then you dig a humongous hole, and then think that you're all of a sudden going to get out of this hole. No, your habits have to be changed at the beginning, and you have to live by certain principles, and then you can be successful.
I noticed too over the years where guys would work hard, then they'd have a big tax bill. Well, now I got to work harder.
Yeah.
Well, then they make more money. The next year the tax bill is higher.
Yes.
So instead of changing some things along the way, you can't continue to increase the workload.
No.
That doesn't work. You got to do something different.
You can't let your lifestyle creep into what you're making and then have the tax bill be. Some people say, well, taxes brought me down if they failed as an owner, or maintenance brought me down. No, your habits brought you down.
Correct.
Yeah. Like you were telling the other day, it's just, you watch a guy and he gets a truck, and then all of a sudden he has a new half ton and a new this and building a new house and all sorts of stuff like that. And he's only been at it, a year and a half or something like that.
No, wasn't even that long.
Not even that long.
6 months.
6 months. Yeah. Well, filling themselves up with debt like crazy. You can tell that it's okay. There is going to be a crunch time. And you can almost say it's like about 16, 18 months when it's going to start feeling it.
Yeah.
And then if they don't take responsibility for the choices that they make, they blame the government for taxes being too high. They blame their accountant. Maybe the accountant doesn't know what they're doing, kind of thing, or they think they don't know what they're doing. Or their maintenance, I just got a lemon. There's nothing around that. No, sometimes there are lemons, without a doubt, but it's certainly not the only answer that's out there. A lot of it is, no, you have to live well below your means in order to get ahead. I like the idea of 15% earnings in there and staying out of debt. We all know, like Alan Hebert, and he's been with us in other podcasts or so. But he built his wealth. We both started about 20 years ago now at the same place. Or actually, I was a little bit lower than he was. I had worse debt. He was below zero as well, but not as much as I was. And he built his, shouldn't say empire, but wealth based on just leveraged, and he's a land developer. Now, a land developer is one of the riskiest things to do in Canada or anywhere, because there's a lot of unsuccessful land developers. But he was mentored by probably, in my opinion, and probably his too, one of the best business guys in Canada. He's passed away now, but he had 30 years being mentored by him, and so he knew the land developing industry, not just in Canada here, but he had a lot of business dealings down the States, building skyscrapers, all sorts of things. And so he knew what was going on. He was a senior VP at the business, so he knew that industry very well. So when he went on his own, he could tell a dud from a success. And I would say 90% of the time he hit it out of the park. It was just exceptional development skills. And 10% of the time, it's not that he lost. It's just that it's either par or just, hasn't got that much return on it or so. But great. Defies everything that Dave Ramsey tells. He does the exact opposite.
But getting into management books, like I've devoured just about all of John Maxwell, Zig Ziglar's books. Goes together with Dave Ramsey.
Oh yeah.
Like he's the money guy, and John Maxwell's the how to manage stuff.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Amazing.
And
that brings up another topic, which is Dave Ramsey does come across he is Judeo-Christian values.
Correct.
That is his thing. And if you listen to it long enough, he talks about religious issues like tithing and other things like that. If you're in Canada and it's not your thing to be religious, that doesn't mean you throw out Dave Ramsey. You just what they call extrapolate. You learn what is the good things that he's teaching, and if you leave the other stuff aside and you learn from that. So some of the best things that I've ever learned is from people who failed, and I just say, okay, I just won't do that. It's the same way in this. If you don't want to listen to certain aspects, like the religious aspects, we have a lot of like Hindu and Sikh and Muslim like clients and people in Canada and many other religions or non-religions or whatever. You don't have to be a Judeo-Christian in order to follow Judeo-Christian values.
Right.
The values are extremely valuable.
Yeah.
Values are very valuable.
The system works
Yes.
in spite of anything else.
Yeah.
It's just like driving truck. You look at it, and from the exterior, you see all these trucks driving up and down the road, and it looks successful. Well, an unsuccessful truck is the one parked on the road that's not making any money. Yeah. So there's a system in this trucking industry that actually works.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the truck's fault that you don't make money. It's you're not working the system. Now, whether it's based on any other kind of value is immaterial. Yeah. It's the system that it either makes you profitable or non-profitable.
It's like I used this illustration the other day. The mafia. There was a certain time in the history, if you study the mafia, there was a certain time period where they were extremely successful, extremely productive, and it was when there was an accountant for all of these, the cartels or whatever in there, and they followed honorable rules, like you didn't steal and you told the truth and you respected people, those kind of things. There's a whole bunch of rules that they followed, and that made them incredibly successful. It was only until when you abandon those rules and you start lying and cheating or whatever, and that's when things went down or whatever. There are principles you live with. Ramsey, if you can grasp the good, solid principles that he teaches, you have to glean the value and extrapolate out from him. 15% earnings. I'd have to say personally that we haven't followed, myself and my wife have not followed this. I've invested into our business. I have real estate and other investments done exceptionally well, and that's because, how do I say this? I'm in control of it, and I can get actually a higher return on investment than the average mutual fund. In my past, I haven't used that 15% rule, but I'm also in a very unique situation, very similar to Alan, whatever. He can get way higher return on his investment than any mutual fund.
That's the best place to invest is in your own business.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think to a certain extent that, in my research and for my second research, when I'm comparing 1996 data to 2012 data in my second book, the point that is made very, very clear on both research projects is that independent operators, whether it's a lease operator or owner operator, really doesn't get any return on their investment until their truck is paid for. If an individual, as soon as they're out of debt, they get right back into debt again, chances are they're in a never plan, especially with the new trucks that are out, because they're their sensors and their engines, they're built in such a way they get a high performance, high cost, but do they have the longevity of the equipment that is going to last longer than 8-10 years? And it doesn't look like that right now. Like you guys both have older trucks that it takes you, you can rebuild an engine for 20, 25, maybe 30 grand or something like that. You can't do that with the newer stuff. It's 50, 60 plus, if at all. If they can even find the parts for them sometimes. And that, so it's a different market, different industry. And if a person wants to be successful as an independent operator, it's kind of sobering to say that the older the vehicle, the higher the probability of being able to manage it into successful. Because, I mean, a $200,000 truck makes the exact same revenue as a $20,000 truck. Not that you can buy a $20,000, even a $50,000 truck. And you got to consider that. It's not just the price of the truck, but the insurance. If you're at a carrier that charges insurance, you got even the IRP on a highway tractor for $200,000 could be $4,000 in a year, where it's $800, $600 for an older truck. There's so much running costs difference between the two. You can be successful, but you just no different than buying a house. You don't start out with a brand new house, generally speaking, unless you have a lot.
Well, I talked to a guy the other in Saskatoon about a brand new W9 Kenworth, $325,000.
Ew.
I thought,
did he have any specializing? Was he hauling specialty stuff or just no?
I'm afraid.
Did you have a lot down?
He must have.
He must.
I
You
didn't ask
better
him
have.
any questions about that. But I thought, how?
There's a limit to which your revenue can be.
Yeah.
Is it a husband and wife situation? No. Oh, yeah. Okay. 3 years, and he's going to be in a crunch.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's sad. Now there are some guys who are hauling highly specialty stuff. And you get very big margins in doing specialty stuff. If you're really talented and working, I got some guys doing exceptionally well, and they can afford a $250,000 truck. Still kind of iffy at that price.
I would shake so much I wouldn't be able to sign it.
That's you're committing to 8 years of your life.
It's not enough
in an industry, and also
that
gives you no guarantees. So you break your leg, and what happens? Yes, you get.
Well, there's your $15,000 emergency fund.
Because poof in 3.
Because
it's gone.
Paying for at least a month down, and then you're hobbling for a month after that. So that it chews up $15,000 so quickly.
Okay, so anyway, that's baby step number 4 is 15% earnings to long-term savings. If a person does that, if they're a regular T4 driver or whatever, it's just a matter of years, and you will be able to retire with a $1 million value. Combination of your paid-for house and your RSPs or TFSAs, it will be $1 million in there, and you should be able to retire quite easily. The 5th baby step is save for children's education, and in Canada, it's not as much of an issue because our education is much more subsidized by the government, but it can be still an issue. A lot depends. It's not really a big issue. I've got hundreds and hundreds of clients, and I think maybe 2 or 3 times in 20 years somebody mentions something about putting their kid through school. Not a big factor. Maybe it's just the market that we do. Not very many truck drivers have PhD children. Though, whatever. We're not dumb. There's some I know some PhDs who are driving because they can't stand being a medical doctor, so they drive, know. But baby step number 6 is pay off the house. Here's one thing that is a little bit different, and you have to combine baby step number 4 and baby step number 6. It's a little bit, and this is something I've never heard Dave Ramsey state, because he's very stay with the program that he has. He doesn't deviate from it. But in Canada, it is more of a benefit for you than you might think to pay off your house rather than throw it into mutual funds. If you're not worried about taxes, because RSPs are a big thing about taxes, paying off your house has a huge return on investment. RSPs, yes, that'll, if it brings down your taxes, it's a better investment. But paying off your house has huge financial benefit for the simple reason, let's say, for the last 20 years, interest rates have been so low, nobody's really thought about the cost of interest on their house. Now that it's starting to go up, and it's actually a significant issue for quite a few people realize that they actually pay the interest on their house with after-tax money. So you have to factor that into there. So if you got a 6% mortgage, typically if you look at what is your actual cost, because you're paying 6% with after-tax money, you're actually getting 9%. You're actually paying 9%. If you want 9% return on your money, pay off your house. You have to take into consideration you're paying it with after-tax money. That skews the data a little bit more towards paying off your house. In my opinion, paying off your house is a great investment. But like I said, not very many people listen to it. But in a lot of our general area around here, it makes a huge difference for the level of risk that we carry and the freedom that we have. If we have no mortgage payment and we have no payments on anything at all, the government doesn't have nearly as much say in our lives as otherwise. Right. And that's true freedom, where you can say, you know what, Ottawa, thank you very much for the suggestion. I think I'll just go a different direction. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do. I do respect guys saying, you know what, doesn't matter what happens, especially like during the government shutdown, the pandemic. Guys had to get vaccinated in order to make their truck payment and stuff. If they had their truck paid for, if their house was paid for, would they still have made that same decision or not? I don't know what percentage it would have been that said, maybe, you know what, I got a lot in savings. Think of it. What if everybody was a millionaire and they didn't have to work anymore? Would they have made that same decision? Chances are not. Maybe not. There's some people who absolutely gonna, they would. That'd probably be over 50%. I would not have. Yeah. And realistically, that's an indication as to how vulnerable our lives are to government. And I'm not saying pandemic or vaccination or whatever. There's a whole myriad of things, especially in Canada, that we are dependent on the government for, that we may or may not directly know. Canada Pension Plan is a big thing. Everybody says, oh, well, Canada Pension Plan or something like that. If they rely on the government for their retirement, I think they're hanging their hat on an extremely loose nail, because it's just an assumption that they're actually, by the time you actually get there, that they're going to be able to follow through on what the promise is. Because first of all, the people in Ottawa, by the time you retire, they're not the same people anymore. No. Not even the bureaucracies. If you've been at it for 25, 30 years, not going to be the same people. Yeah. They don't have to honor somebody else's word. Let's just swing to a different direction.
Well, it's amazing. It's just like nowadays. It used to be, 10, 15 years ago, you'd get a contract, and that was a valid contract. Now, you get a contract. Oh, I can't fulfill that. Well, no, you sign your... That doesn't matter.
Well, it's like...
Sue me. Whatever. Yeah. Like, a contract does not mean what a contract used... You know, and even if a guy goes and buys a brand new truck and says, you know what, I've got a contract. The company A has promised me this many miles, and they can drive as much as you can and whatever. According to these numbers, it'll work. Yeah. Well, wait till the first month that they're 500 miles short. What do you do then?
Or not just that. Okay, let's say, for instance, they're bought out, and this happens all the time, mergers and acquisitions. And the person who buys out says, okay, by the way, you got a new contract now. Well, it totally changes. Yep. You got an entirely new market, new distribution. Everything is going totally different. Signing up for 8 years, you are making huge assumptions about those 8 years.
Yeah.
Are you going to be where are you going to be in 8 years from now? Where's the company going to be in a year? What's the economy going to be like? I remember when you couldn't borrow on a highway tractor for more than 4 years. 4 years was the absolute limit. Then it went to 5, and I go, okay, 5. Well, what else? Whatever. And then 6, and then 7, and now I've seen 8, and it's just foolishness. You're upside down for the majority of that time.
Yeah, but after 3-4 years, you start to have your warranty runs out.
Yeah.
And you're still got 4 years to make payments, and now you have all these bills yet on top of that too.
Yeah, and basically the industry says, well, trade the truck in when your warranty is on.
You're almost forced to do that.
The only thing is you're upside down.
Yeah.
Even if so whatever you put into it, like $20,000 or $30,000 to get into the truck in the first place, by the time you get to that 3 or 4 year marker, your $20,000 is long gone.
Yeah.
It's not in the truck. Your debt at best is equal to the value of the truck, but usually it's below. Your debt is higher than the value of your truck, and now you're upside down. Yeah. And so the next truck that you trade in, you start in an even worse situation. Yeah. There's a lot of presumption when the entire industry starts stretching out the debt of trucks on a highly depreciating truck. You are going to be upside down.
There's a term that's come up and I guess they use it. It doesn't make sense to me because it's totally counterproductive. It is called negative equity.
Oh yeah.
Like, I have negative equity.
I've had almost a decade of my life in negative equity. Yeah, I know what it's like.
You're basically, I have money that's not there. Well, I know. The person I was talking to thought it was a positive. They didn't understand that at negative, you're in a hole. No, I just used the negative equity to readjust this and refinance, and we're good to go.
It's just kicking the real problem down.
Yeah,
like kicking the can down the road even further. You know,
they're using liability as they're just changing the term to negative equity, and then it sounds like you've got something still. Yeah, but you don't. It's double negative or whatever.
It's not really negative equity. Equity is a positive.
Yes,
it's supposed to be positive, so it brings it into a neutral kind of a thing. But there's far too much of that going on. Can you make money in the trucking? It's absolutely you can. Yep. Yep. But the industry tells you this is how you should do it. But no, it's in their interest to say that you do things in a certain way. But realistically, the success is a completely different route to go. I used to, years ago, think that you should never get into, what do they call that, carrier leases, walk-away leases, But if the alternative is to sign away years of your life on assumptions, I think you have to find out how the truck is actually going to do before you actually make any kind of assumptions. Buying a brand new truck, there's a lot of assumptions in there.
Too many unknowns.
Far too many unknowns. Is there successful people in the industry? Absolutely. Yeah. But they almost invariably, I don't know very many who started out 100% in debt with it. Well, okay, shouldn't say that. There are some people who got a whole bunch of credit card debt and to put down on a truck, and then they just went out there. But they lived super below their means, and they were focused like they make it look like anybody can do it, but really they sacrificed more than anything. I mean, their wife had a job, and their wife kept everything at home, and all they did was just get out of debt with it. And it can be done, but it probably shouldn't be told that that's an option, because the vast majority of people don't have that level of focus, intensity over an extended period of time in order to be successful. Okay, so we got, after you pay off your house, live and give like nobody else. Baby step millionaires becoming a millionaire. Is it possible? Absolutely. They've done a lot of research, huge levels of research, and I agree. You can become wealthy, but it is over decades, not over just a few years. That's very, very little can actually be done in 1 or 2 or 3 years, but over a decade, especially 2 decades, man, that you can do quite a bit. But you got to have dedication and focus to it.
But most of the time you don't think about that till you're 40, 45.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about talking about some of the principles about some of the rules in there? I'll just go through some basic stuff, or some one-liners, and then we could comment. He says leases are fleeces, and I have a podcast or a video out there, the difference between owning and leasing. I don't know if you've ever seen it or whatever.
We talked about it.
Yeah, we talked about it. The difference. Leasing is the last option you ever want to do. You have got to be painted, in my opinion, painted into a corner in order to use a lease. A person should never lease a vehicle. I know it's hugely popular in Quebec and Ontario, but realistically, ownership is the primary feature. There's far too many restrictions. The industries that make money on fleeces are the financing companies, the dealerships, and the like. Realistically, ownership is key. I highly I suggest people watching my lease versus owning video on there. Another thing, wheels and toys, 50% of annual salary. So let's say, for instance, the average truck driver makes $70,000 a year. That means that your personal vehicles, and anything that has wheels and he goes engines that go vroom vroom, and toys shouldn't be more than $35,000. Some people say, "Oh my goodness, if you're a two-car family kind of a thing, that that means you have to have a little bit more lower value in vehicles." But otherwise, the depreciation on those toys and vehicles are higher than what you can afford to absorb, and which is good principles to have. We talked a little bit about this before. Auto repairs have to be less than the value of the repaired vehicle. Otherwise, you get a different vehicle. For the cars in debt snowball, have to be less than 24 months to be completely paid off, or just sell the vehicle and get a cheaper one. He's a huge anti-annuities. He says annuities are a waste. I know this jumps around from different topics, but no single stocks. But it does apply to some people. If an individual, an independent operator, works at a carrier that is publicly traded, they oftentimes get stock options, and they can buy stocks for 15% below market. It sounds like, oh my goodness, 15% below market. That's awesome. There's two restrictions on it. Number one, there is a time factor that they have to hold on to it, and it's generally, I think it's 18 months, 24 months, something around that. I could vary a little bit in there. So they have to hold on to that stock for some time. And the second major thing is, generally speaking, stocks, especially in the trucking industry, can vary in from year to year 15% or more. It's not a deal that they're getting that is specific to them, because it's in there by law. If you sell shares, if a carrier sells shares to their employees or independent operators, it has to, from what I understand by law, be 15% below market, what the market is paying for it. So it's worked in there because you can't sell it when it's peak, and then you get it or even lower or whatever. That's just the rules. He does not believe at all in land leases or rent to own, because when the title is still in somebody else's name, you become vulnerable. If there's that other person gets into an accident or something, it still can be grabbed and you lose it. When you're mortgaging your home, 15-year fixed, 10 to 20% down and 25% take home. We touched a little bit on that before. No debt for investment real estate. So there's actually quite a few drivers that say, okay, well, I want to buy a duplex or a half a duplex or something like that. So he saves up money and buys it. That is a big difference between Canada and the United States. In the United States, you can do that even if you like let's say you follow the Ramsey plan and you don't have any debt on it, okay, and it's pretty decent investment. In Canada, I don't recommend that at all. There's a lot of people who do it for the simple reason that we have a bizarre law that has tax of passive income. Passive income has 50% tax rate, which means that if you own, say, a duplex and you're renting it out, that's classified as passive income. And what classifies it as unpassive income is the owner of the property has 5 or more employees. That's the primary real. So if you're an independent operator or even self-employed and you buy a duplex, technically speaking, you're in a situation where you have passive income, and the taxes on there is going to be 50%. And it is a huge problem in Canada. It's one of the stupidest laws out there. And what it does is it takes away the opportunity for independent entrepreneurial people to build wealth. The only way you can get around that is somehow or other have a business that has 5 or more employees, and then you can have real estate as a side investment or something like that in order to do it. It's a terrible, terrible rule. It's a sad thing. I know of a couple of operators who have, rental houses and stuff like this. Some have been doing it for 20 years, and they are in a situation where they have put passive income. They have got to find some way of getting out of that without paying 50% tax rate on any of your. It's like.
So let's say you bought that house for 300, just for example.
Yeah.
You bought it for 300,000. You had it for 20 years, and it's paid for,
mm-hmm.
and it's still worth 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have to pay 150,000 in taxes?
It depends on what you sell it for. Let's say if it's only worth 300,000, you haven't made anything other than the. I would say if your rent was $1,000 a month, but your expenses were $1,000 a month, not count $1,000 a month, not counting depreciation. If you didn't depreciate it at all, and so your money that came in went out, and there was no capital gains, well, then there is no income, so you don't have to pay it. But generally speaking, you're gonna sell it. If you own it for 20 years, you're gonna sell it for, $500,000 or more. It's 800,000 or something like that. Then technically speaking, there's capital gains. But if you, in order to keep your taxes down, you've depreciated that from 300,000 down to say 200,000. You have recapture and you have capital gains. But then any income in there, it is classified as passive income. It is not a good situation to be in. The rule is horrible. It is absolutely terrible, and it's huge. It doesn't make any difference if you had a management company manage it. It's still passive income. It's one of the worst bills, and hopefully someday that'll be reversed. One of the big factors with Dave Ramsey is he's a real estate. I shouldn't say mogul. He's a guru. He just understands. If you buy a house, for instance, you don't buy it in the neighborhood that you don't buy it at the highest value in your neighborhood. You buy it right in the middle. That way, and not on the bottom. You right in the middle, because you don't want the worst house in the neighborhood, and you don't want the best house in the neighborhood, because when it comes time to sell it, you're going to be the highest priced one, and what you want to be able to do is you have the flexibility increase your price from the middle up, and the highest is not the right factor, which is good. But the overall kind of thread when he gives real estate advice is that there is no such thing as a dream home or a final home or anything like that, and that is not always the case. And he always says anything and everything is for sale.
That's a salesman.
Yeah, it's a salesman. It's absolutely true. And not everybody is like that. He gives advice based on the fact that, no, you want to buy a house because the next house that you live in 15, 20 years from now is XYZ. From a perspective of a real estate person, yeah, there's turnover. And but not everybody does turnover. Yes, there's a lot of the younger people. There is turnover, and you might need some turnover, especially when you're young and you buy, small or something cheap right at the beginning or whatever, and you're working your way up. But there does come a point in time where you say, okay, you know what, that's it. We're sort of sticking, and you can be a little bit more long-term oriented for that. No house trailers, and I think we've all violated that one. But it did give us a time to to keep our expenses down too. We can pay something off and keep our expenses down.
I would even now move into a trailer.
You would?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, I do live in a trailer. I know I didn't want to say that, but
Well, yours is more a house than...
very few people would recognize it
Yeah.
as a trailer.
Yeah.
But
We had our house up for sale last year, and there's a trailer park just down the road from us, out in the country in the bush. Nobody knows it's there.
yeah.
And there was a trailer there for sale, beautiful trailer.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, I said, when we sell the house, why don't we buy this? We have lots of money left over,
Yeah.
and whatever, I'm cool with this.
Yeah.
We're
One thing-
hardly ever there anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And-
There's a lot of clients, or a
But
lot
I-
of clients that have sold everything, put everything into investments, and just went out on the road, and
Well,
they
I
come
wouldn't
back.
want to do that. But,
Well, maybe no, so-
But I couldn't get my wife to do that.
no,
There's no way I could get her
you got
into
a nest somewhere. That's for
into
sure.
a trailer. But like for me, as long as you're there, I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah.
Putting ours up for sale again in spring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We just want to downsize. Our house is way too big.
Yeah.
We don't need the room. It's nice when the kids come, but they can do with less.
We have a big enough place, but it's first of all, the thing I like about our setup is, first of all, it's a house trailer, so technically speaking, it's depreciating on the books. My property taxes is a fraction of everybody else's, and I don't really care what the market value is. I have no intention of selling it. We are on 80 acres, and we can retire there. The only time where it may not be something where we retire, if there's some health issue that we have to be in the hospital or something for some horrible thing, I understand. But we've written a will, and it'll be offered to all of our kids at a specific rate, because all of our kids want the location. I mean, there's not very many places in left anymore with 80 acres, in there. So I do understand, and I like the idea of a trailer. We built it very special in terms of it's sealed. The biggest thing is sealing everything so that you don't get mice and stuff like that. And so it's a great situation. But you got to think ahead too. Maybe we haven't thought that much ahead yet, but realistically, to retire in there, we have no problem. It's all one level. It's big enough for the grandchildren to come in. And right now, for the next 10 years, that's going to be the major thing. And if we retire there, we retire there.
We just came back from British Columbia, and we were actually amazed how many people have sold everything and they live in a camper trailer.
Oh yeah, that's dedication.
Because
but
it's
you
so
can do
expensive.
that. Okay, on this side of the Rocky, like on east side of the Rockies or the west side?
West side.
West side, yeah, because you
Yeah.
can't do it on the east side of the Rockies. You freeze your buns off in winter.
I know a couple in Alberta. They live in a mobile or in a camper fifth wheel,
Yeah.
and they put skirting around it too, and they have a big propane tank, and it can be done.
This is a nice controversial one. They're because they have Judeo-Christian values, they push married versus living together. And I know probably we all have our strong views on marriage as well. Just from an accounting perspective, from a legal perspective in Canada, if you live together for more than 2 years, you're going to end up being very similar to being married anyway. From a legal perspective, it's a mess when you live together and you break up. One of the most difficult things, and we should do a podcast straight on this, is one of the most difficult things that an accountant goes through is when they have we have clients and they work together and everything is fine, and all of a sudden they divorce. And the cost of divorce. In my opinion, and I think it's Ramsey too, the leading cause of poverty in North America is probably divorce. And divorce in and of itself, you don't have to be married to go through a divorce, in my opinion anyway. That's just a name. If you've lived together for 10 years or cohabit for 10 years or whatever, and then you split up, it's just as messy. There is no benefit to living together from a financial perspective. It can be dragged out through all sorts of litigation issues. And everybody keeps thinking that, oh, no, you just live together and then you don't have any risk factors. Baloney.
After 2 years, they consider you married.
Consider you, yeah. There are some exceptions in there, but the vast majority of the situations are still it's going to cost a boatload. And he's had some very, very good, you don't buy a house together with somebody that you're not married with. And legally, it is horrible. Even in Canada. I mean, you're not going to, whatever you thought you were going to gain on the house at the time when you do it, by the time you go through a divorce or separation or annulling or how do you say, ripping apart a common law situation, there's no money left over anyway. It's all in the courts and in the legal system somewhere. In my opinion, it's the same thing as getting out of debt. It requires focus and 100% commitment. Every marriage, in one way or another, there comes a point in time where people don't feel like being married anymore to that person, whoever it is. No matter how wonderful and nice I am, well, my wife, she kicked me out, obviously, but in the end, you endure, and in the end, you get a much better position in life. It is very, very difficult to gain wealth when you're single, and it's even worse when you go through a divorce. There has to be teamwork in there. I know there's guys going to be disagreeing with me, and because I know of a few guys who basically live out on the road and they make a lot of money, but they don't make super great business choices. It's expensive splitting up, no matter what, whether it's a divorce or whether it's a splitting up of a common law situation. You can lose 10, 20 years of your life in a couple of really bad choices. Really bad choices, that's for sure. When it comes to marriage and living together, they're big on joining accounts. And I think we've talked a little bit about this before. When you have joint accounts, you have to deal with all the different issues of life and understanding it. And that forces you to deal with a lot of issues that you otherwise wouldn't. Everyone has their own desires to spend money. Like where I have difficulty controlling my spending is probably a trip to Staples. I love office stuff, but that's not very expensive stuff. You can buy a whole lot of stickums, and it's not very expensive. That's not what's going to get me in the poorhouse, But being accountable for things, back and forth, that's what both understanding what's going on is very cool. Dave Ramsey was on Oprah Winfrey, and the reason why he's not back on Oprah Winfrey is half Oprah Winfrey doesn't want him back, and the other half or more, Dave Ramsey doesn't want to go in there. Oprah brought a situation where I think it was a woman who got $75,000 in credit card debt without her spouse knowing it, and they were then talking about money, and the whole audience and Oprah said, that she's in fault and fault. And what Dave Ramsey said in the program was, you're absolutely right, it is the woman's fault. It's what he calls financial infidelity. However, he says, the husband should have understood what was going on. It was his responsibility to understand everything that's going on in the household. Both of them have to understand what's going on. To hide $75,000 worth of debt, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
If you open up the cupboard and you got the closet and you got 15 pair of Gucci shoes, I mean, and what you can do mental math. You don't have to be down to the detail. You can say, there's something wrong here, and you have to find out. There was a certain amount of, denying that the guy would have to go through. I don't want to hear, I don't want to know, I don't know. And he says that was his fault. And he got trashed on. The audience went against him, and Oprah didn't agree with him and stuff. And he said, no. In a couple situation, both have to know where things are going. It's sometimes very difficult to get every penny down, But for certainly, you round things off to average. That should never, ever, ever occur in a marital situation where you both have understanding of what's going on. Anyway, that's pretty much it. There's one other point that I wanted to make. After about a year of listening to Dave Ramsey, pretty much 95% of everything you hear, you've heard before. It's all the same stuff. It's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And that's one of the reasons it drills it into you, and you fully understand the program after listening to it for a full year. Why I went further than a year was that last 5%. Occasionally you come up with a situation that just opens your mind about something and you go, I never thought about that ever before. Holy cow, what happened? And it usually has to do with money, but it's oftentimes your relationships. Or there was one that I learned. I developed an entire understanding about wills and estates and how to handle your death and parents and all sorts of things, how to deal with wills and succession. It was fabulous. I just learned that whole thing, and yet that's not his major point. I'll tell you a story that I heard. When a girl graduated high school, she was 17 years old and went to university. And this was back in 2003. Her parent signed up for a student loan because she was too young to sign up for a student loan. And the parent said, are you okay with, we'll split it 50-50. The child said, or the 17-year-old said, yes. When we pay it back, we'll split it 50. And the total of that student loan was $30,000. A few years after she graduated, she started making payments to her mom directly. $500, $200, whatever it was, and started paying. At some point in time, a few years later, whatever it was, she found out that her mom wasn't making payments on this student loan. And so she was paying her mom, but the mom wasn't making the payments on it. And so she confronted her mother about it and said, hey, what is this? And the mother said, apologized, and then turned around and said, okay, I accept the apology or whatever, and continued to pay her mom. Okay? And then a number of years later, she found out that her mom still didn't make the payments. As soon as she found out the second time her mom wasn't making the payments, she totaled up everything what she had paid so far, and it was $5,000. Then she just stopped making payments. Okay? And now the original thing started in 2003. Now it's 2023, and because her mom hadn't made a single payment, the bill was not $30,000 anymore. It was $70,000 because it's 20 years later. Okay? And now the mom wants cash. She says, well, the bill is $70,000. I want at least $35,000. Okay? How do you deal with that? And realistically, when it came through, I'm going, holy cow, this is a family situation, money situation. It's usually the other way around where the kid is irresponsible, but this was the parent situation. How do you do it? And basically, Dave Ramsey said, okay, you owe your mom $10,000, and maybe you want to throw in an additional, $5,000 or $2,000 or something like that for interest in that. But then once you're done that's it. You walk away, and because everything is in the mother's name, and you just don't allow the debt. You don't allow the guilt, or because their situation, and a situation where somebody makes a really bad financial choice, and they're close to you, and you have empathy for them, but it's their crap that they ended up stepping in. You have to have the courage to stand up and say, look, this is your baby. I'm not responsible for this. This is what I'm responsible for, and that's it. And that could split families, all sorts of things. But principles there where you get a good, that 5% where you get a good, I never thought about this before. And being able to stand up for yourself, that's maybe one thing that I kind of lack. I don't confront people nearly as much sometimes. You're better at it, confronting.
too good.
Maybe too good. But, it's good. You have to have friends sometimes to say, okay, no, you kick their butt sometimes because you really love the person.
In love.
Yeah, you kick their butt in love, eh? in there. But those kind of situations, you learn and gain wisdom, and just, man, okay, I never thought of it like that. I want to think about things in a little bit more wise situation, and being able to thread that through. He's got great responses to things, and as a mentor, you can have Dave Ramsey mentor you for sure, absolutely, and learn how to do things and not do things. There was another principle that he talks about: never have your investments greater than 10% in single stocks. Like, you don't want to go out and have more than 10% of your investments be, say, like an Apple, no matter how good of an Apple stock is or whatever. But mutual funds has to be 90% or greater. It's true under vast majority of the time, unless you have some sort of specialization, in my opinion. And I do agree with it under most circumstances. I don't follow that for the simple reason that I don't have very much mutual funds at all. It's all real estate that I own myself free and clear. And so there's some things that you sort of have to play a little bit into context. But other than that, man, it's pretty unique. That, I mean, learning from somebody like Dave is a great. He's got a good 35, 40 years of radio experiences, and it's a lot of the advice that he gives sometimes is very simplistic. It's a little bit too simplistic, but you have to realize, or anybody, if you listen to it, he's only got 6 or 7 minutes to hear the story and then give a response, and you're not going to get very much in depth into it. Sometimes you totally miss the mark. That's for sure. Remember, like, just this whole thing about never have more than 10% of your investments in single stocks. If you know the fortune of Dave Ramsey, he says he's $200 million worth $200 million. He just built a Ramsey Event Center, 2,500 seat convention center and hotel and stuff like this. A great investment. I know when he's a salesman and he knows real estate valuations. I'm very confident in making an assumption that he never paid $200 million for that stuff. He would probably somewhere between 80 and 120 million is what he actually paid for it, because his event center and hotels would probably be $100 million, but he probably paid only 60, 70 or something like that. It's because he evaluates it by cap rate, which is that's the market value of it. A lot is so, but he has a convention center and a hotel room. It's off the beaten track. I've seen where they're building it and everything. It's not in downtown Nashville kind of a thing. It is for his business, Ramsey Solution, and is for his clientele. And in my opinion, it is the real estate that he has is exposed to his business quite a bit. Well, it's no different than me owning the buildings that I have my business in. I'm my own landlord and tenant, so I can feel confident with my tenant under most circumstances. So I'm sort of self-building, and that's what he's doing too. But realistically, if you would look at what I own, so much of it is actually dependent on my business. It's just anchored there, and so much of what he has invested is invested in his business. And if you ask his big office buildings, if you combine that and also combine the event center, that is a considerable chunk of his $200 million, and that's all based on the success of Ramsey Solutions, which might be a good bet because he's betting on himself, but he's still exposed. He's not diversified like a mutual fund is. Absolutely not. But he is betting on himself. Yeah, he's got a good track record, and if we bet on ourselves, we have the most amount of control over our own success. Mutual funds come and go up, down, whatever, but we can get the best returns if we invest in ourselves. There's some people who shouldn't probably. There's some people who shouldn't invest in themselves, but it becomes clear later on, because they don't have the capabilities and to follow through with stuff for sure. But some people are extremely competent, and being invested in themselves is absolutely true. There's lots of, like J.R. Simplot. I read his biography. Most of everything that he owns is always. He just invested in himself, and he became billions. Well, Elon Musk, same thing. He just invests in himself, and he manages everything. Same as Bill Gates. Warren Buffett actually invests in other people. He doesn't do any work other than the investment. He's a capital distributor. But Bill Gates, he invested in himself. Who's that guy? Steve Jobs. Invested in himself. The people who are billionaires, basically they invest in themselves. In their what's his name? Jeff Bezos. Same thing. He's investing in himself, and you can get the greatest return on investment if you invest in yourself if you're competent. What is incredibly impressive, in my opinion, of Dave Ramsey is he knows that he's infallible. Like he's going to die someday. To keep his investments keep going, then he has co-hosts and all these other things or whatever, and he's building up the entire brand. So it's not just Dave Ramsey; it's now Ramsey Solutions with everything, and that's the way to do it. That is actually a very difficult thing to do in business, and he even mentioned that once too. Succession is not an easy thing. In the trucking industry, that's a big thing too. There are guys who start trucking companies, put their name behind it, and that's very typical, And then the father starts it, and then the son takes over, and then the son. It's the second and third. That's when it all falls apart. He has to be able to have an organization that it's going to be responsible all the way through, and that's tough. Like, you look in Canada, there's so many examples where family dynasties, because Canada is like that. They just monopolies and oligopolies, like the Richardson family. What's that family called? I read the biography of the Canadian Tire, the family that started Canadian Tire, and they have billions of dollars. Well, shares, I don't know so much anymore. But then there's the guys who make Crown Royal, the not Bronf. You don't think it's the Bronfmans, Seagram, or whatever. They make alcohol. They started hauling with Al Capone from Canada into the United States, and that's where they made their original first thing. Actually, before that, they had the father peddling fish in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And the guy had a fish cart or whatever, and all through was it eastern Saskatchewan and southern Manitoba, the grandfather, that's what he started out, and then they got into making liquor with Al Capone. They got big money on there, and then once they got a certain money together, they bought a hotel in Winnipeg, and they started making huge money, $50,000 a month. They were making, and this was back in the 30s, and then they built money and built an empire. Great story, fabulous how they got into billions and billions. There's a great quote on there: "To make your first million is a lot of work and sacrifice, It is tough, really, really tough. But to go from 10 million to 11 million is inevitable." Which basically means it's really tough at the beginning. A lot of people want to go straight into the, 10 plus million or whatever. You can't. You have to go through the tough stuff right at the beginning. Canada has got some great dynasties, but whether those dynasties continue on or not is pretty much completely up to them. But anyway, that's Dave Ramsey. Boy, I enjoyed talking about this and a lot of personal stuff or so. And hope people listen to Dave Ramsey and get some experience with not only their podcast or YouTube channel and stuff like this, but if you're in debt, use the Ramsey method and to get yourself out of debt.
It'll work every time.
Yeah.
Is he still on 131 on satellite radio? I know he was on satellite radio too for a while.
Yeah.
He probably still is.
Awesome. Well, that's it. Have a great trip.
Thanks for stopping by Making Your Miles Count. For further Making Your Miles Count productions, call us at 877-987-9787 or download us at makingyourmilescount.com.